Hi, I'm Rob Maigret. I'm a creative technologist based out of Los Angeles, and I'm also the chairman of Lydion Research. You're listening to Brave New Data, the Data Economics Podcast. This is a podcast that is dedicated to making data science relevant and accessible for everyone by bringing in folks from various industries that power and are powered by data, which can kind of be almost any company today, I think. And today joining me is Alice Crisci, and she is the CEO and co-founder of a company called MedAnswers. Hey, Alice.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me in.
Did I get that right?
You did perfect.
Okay, so it's clean. Yeah. So Alice, now I know the answer or some answer to this, but just if you could spend a few minutes and tell us a little bit about what MedAnswers is.
Oh, I would love to. So MedAnswers is a health tech company dedicated to increasing access to specialists when you're faced with a health crisis. We started with fertility. So our flagship product is called FertilityAnswers. It's an iOS and Android app and designed exactly the same way to increase access for people who are struggling to conceive to the specialists that they need. We tackle two problems though. It's kind of a dual-sided marketplace problem. We really do have a shortage of fertility specialists in the world. There are only about 5,000 clinics to serve 180 million people.
Really? Whoa.
It's nuts. Yeah. And then coupled with that, it's historically been a cash-based area of healthcare. So we also have kind of exorbitant fees. So when I was looking at starting this company and I thought, well, how do I serve the clinics? What good am I to them? I can reduce their patient acquisition cost. If I aggregate demand into one place, which is what I'm doing, I give my users access to these experts. They get to ask anonymous questions. But then with this health data, I can match them to a specialist and get them into a clinic.
Oh, wow.
And if I get them into a clinic faster, then they can achieve their dream of having a family faster.
Right. So that's wild. So it's kind of like, you're essentially the funnel, right?
That's exactly what we are.
And all of these people are coming in and you're really helping them not only get paired with someone who could help them, but to better understand what's happening with them.
That's exactly it.
That's really cool.
I mean, here's the thing when you're facing any crisis, right? You turn to Google, you turn to Facebook groups, you turn to all these places online. We noticed that the spread of misinformation was increasing in intensity. It's like California wildfires. Just a little bit of wind and it's out of control. And the same thing's happening in the fertility space. It's happening in every area of healthcare, but I can't tackle all domains at one time.
Right.
So when we noticed that, we said, this doesn't make any sense. We have to give people clinically validated answers. And the only way to do that is to let the clinicians themselves generate the answers. And we've been very successful with that. We have 9,500 answers already provided by about 300 different experts. They're multidisciplinary. So we cover about 12 different areas of healthcare that people need in fertility, including attorneys. So, if you have to go down the path of IVF, if you need a surrogate, if you need a donor, if you're a same-sex couple pursuing parenthood, you have legal that needs to come into play. So if you have questions about that, we've got attorneys that can cover it, but we also have REIs, reproductive endocrinologists, and infertility specialists. We have urologists, psychologists, embryologists answer fantastically. They are very educational in nature, and they're so good at answering patient questions. We also have geneticists, genetic counselors, just to name a few.
Yeah, you know what I noticed you didn't say is you don't have peers.
We don't,
right? Because I think whatever it is that someone's going through, and let's say you have high cholesterol and you start taking a statin or something and it's not working well, and you tell somebody and they're going to tell you their story, right? But it doesn't necessarily help you.
Correct.
Right? The worst person you want to take advice from is somebody else who's got the same problem, right?
Well, I think so. I think that all these groups and the old school forums, I remember Yahoo forums, and all these places for people to congregate. The online world made it accessible to receive emotional support very quickly. And the way that we used to go about that seemed to work better for that emotional support. Facebook groups, Twitter, mostly Facebook groups, I see this really pervasive. It's so fast to get that instant gratification of anybody responding. that I truly feel that it's a false sense of security.
Yeah.
You know, you're getting advice from people that might live 8,000 miles away from you with a completely different set of health data, completely different scenario, different environment, different type of IVF, different everything. And yet there's a couple of nuggets in there that feels the same. And people hang on to the nuggets that feel the same. And then they say, oh, that's going to work for me. Or that must be the answer. That must be the solution. And they kind of take off with it. And it leads to a lot of rabbit holes. Now, in some cases, it leads to a breakthrough. That's undeniable. But to start there is a really dangerous place. And to start there without having access to these specialists for second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 8 opinions, I think is really risky.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that I didn't really think about is the idea and the power of emotional support. And that, you know, you're not trying to take that away, but you're trying to make sure that people are getting the right questions answered by experts.
By the right people. Yeah. No, the emotional support is huge. I mean, you know, I had cancer, and having emotional support makes the marathon of getting through diagnosis, treatment, and then recovery, it makes it doable.
Yeah. Without
the emotional support, you're isolated, you're alone, you're depressed, you're anxious, you feel like there's no end in sight. So we refer people to emotional support channels that are tried and true, vetted. That's why we have psychologists. We have amazing programs. We work with Resolve, which is the National Infertility Organization. They have both in-person support groups and online support groups. We have a scientific advisory committee so that they can vet all the solutions. You know, so anybody coming to us, whether we match them to a provider, a product, or a solution, it's already been vetted by our scientific advisory committee, because it's really important that whatever we're putting in front of them is not just clinically validated from a, board certified clinician standpoint, but it's also scientifically validated, that there are enough peer reviewed publications behind it. There are enough subjects that have gone through, good clinical trials. That's super important to us. We want to be that trusted advisor, for the field. Yeah.
So I have to ask, and you mentioned that you had cancer, and coming out of that, was there a realization that something like this should exist?
No, there wasn't.
Is there a connection there?
Yeah, there is a connection, but it's funny. I feel like in being an entrepreneur, you don't know when the idea is going to pop, and it's hard to really point to one thing or 15 things for the idea to pop. And sometimes people create things kind of, while they're in their crisis. I did that when I was going through cancer. My only idea that I had at the time was for an onco-fertility charity, but it was still to solve a similar problem. It was to increase access, because I was learning that oncologists weren't routinely referring patients in time to tackle fertility preservation, or even to do a consult to say, this is what's going to happen with your endocrine system by going through treatment. Oh. And I was outraged by that. I'm still outraged by the lack of referral system set up, and the same problem exists in reproductive medicine. So what happens is people kind of get bottlenecked with their primary care provider or their OBGYN or their family doctor. And so they're communicating all these symptoms. And there's a point when the symptoms or the problem or even a confirmed diagnosis should trigger a consult to a specialist, a referral to a specialist. And it's not happening. It's not happening routinely. It's not happening all the time. And then I've seen this same problem replicated even in people who are dealing with migraines. They get kind of bottlenecked in the primary care channel. We can't have that happen. Specialists exist for a reason. We need very quick referrals. We need easy access. We need people to be able to pick up the phone and talk to a specialist rather than waiting an hour and a half in a waiting room where they had to drive an hour just to get there. So I think a lot of technology, really opens up these tools. But to answer your question more specifically, yes, there was a significant part of my cancer journey that I can look back. And as Steve Jobs, once said in one of his really fantastic graduation speeches, look back and you can connect the dots. Mm-hmm. So I can do the same. Yeah. I had a primary oncologist and a second opinion oncologist. They disagreed with what my treatment plan should be. And I was so frustrated. I felt like I was in a ping pong match, and I don't know why. To this day, I was 31 years old when I was going through treatment. I do not know why I had the foresight or even the wherewithal or kind of the empowerment, but I required them to get on a conference call with me. I required these 2 oncologists to get on a conference call with me. And I told them, I need you to explain to each other what your position is and why. And I just want to bear witness to it.
Right.
That was a game changer for me, though, because I ended up picking a much more aggressive treatment plan that my second opinion oncologist recommended.
Yeah.
So that dialogue, though, getting to witness their critical thinking and getting to be part of the critical thinking is the foundation for MedAnswers.
Yeah. Yeah. It was amazing. You just described that. And I was thinking to myself, like, oh, I've never done that. And there's been at least a handful of times that I was getting different information, and I never thought like, oh, let's all get on the phone. Let's have a conversation, because it's not offered. Like,
No,
I've never had a doctor say, oh, I'll just do a conference call with whomever and we can talk it out.
No, they're pretty competitive. They don't love to do that.
Yeah. And I was thinking also, like, and I've been thinking about this lately, I don't have any children, and, my wife and I we are the same age. We're actually the same exact age. We were born on the same day.
Get out.
Yeah. So.
Oh my gosh.
Whose birthday is it? But
at least you'll never forget each other's
right.
birthday.
That's true. But we're now past the age where we could have a child, and I was thinking, like, no one ever offered up. Like, no one said, hey, Rob, you know what? You might want to think about this. You might want to think about the fact that, you're a certain age, and I know you don't want any children right now, but you might change your mind in 10 years. Like, I don't think anybody said that to her either. It's not necessarily on the offering. And yet, and you know this better than I do, people are having children older and older and older, right? They're getting much more of a foundation before they want to have kids. And like, I don't understand why it's not just something that, is part of the plan.
Right. So it's funny. I used to think people were waiting longer and longer to have babies. And it is true that the average age of first birth is a little bit later than it used to be, but it's still in our 20s.
Really? Okay.
So this is the power of the media, is the media has done a wonderful job convincing everyone that nobody wants to have a baby in their 20s anymore. Well, the media is wrong. And yes, the average age of IVF for a lot of clinics used to be 40. It's now dropping. One of the clinics in our network, the average age is now 36.
Really? Okay.
That makes me wildly happy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the younger you are, if you need IVF, the more successful it's going to be. It can often be the difference between using your own eggs and using an egg donor. But what's really devastating is to see on my platform, 65% of my users are under the age of 30. They're coupled up. About 45% are married, and the other 45% are coupled up. And they've already been struggling to conceive for 17 months or longer.
Whoa.
Now, the definition of infertility is 12 months of unassisted attempts at conception, and then you have the diagnosis of infertility. Now, on top of that, my user base is largely obese. And that's because 60% of reproductive age people are obese. This is not, our data set is large enough to be more than statistically significant. It is population level data. It's aligned with population level data. And a lot of them already have known diagnoses. And yet 2/3 have never gone into an IVF clinic for a consult with a specialist.
Really? And I guess we don't know. I mean, we don't know why, right? They don't know it's available? Or?
So I think with problems like this in healthcare, it's such a multifaceted problem. So if I look at our data set, one of the issues that we see is that half of the users are more than 30 miles away from a clinic. So if we look at that shortage of clinics in the US, the numbers are quoted as 7 million people struggling to conceive. I think that is wildly off. I think it's double that because of the obesity epidemic. Right. And we can't exclude obesity as a driver of infertility. It very much is hurting millennials and hurting young adults in their attempts to conceive for both men and women. And if I look at that, like, okay, distance might be a reason. It's an overwhelming appointment. And I think that people know that. I think because of the Facebook groups, people know that it's like a 3-hour consult. It's not a pop in for 22 minutes with your OBGYN. It's sort of significant. And I think that there's a misperception that they're going to be, quote unquote, sold an IVF cycle. So they're also going into it thinking, I can't afford treatment.
Right.
Therefore, I'm not even going to try. And then there's this other area where they're simply not ready for medical intervention because my belief is they don't have enough data about themselves to understand all the different options. So IVF has become widely known enough, I think, to pose a barrier in itself. It's invasive. It's difficult. You see all the Instagram posts on people's journeys. You see the number of needles surrounding pregnancy announcements.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're somebody that has a fear of needles or a fear of doctors or a fear of the healthcare system or any of those things, this patient population is also young enough in their minds to keep trying everything that they can at home, unassisted. So, the frustration is they need that consult. They need the specialist to sit down and say, look, I've looked at your health data, all your labs, it's not just 3 hormones, it's 8 or 9 that we need to evaluate. I've evaluated your BMI. I've evaluated your genetics. I've evaluated your scans, and I'll give you a year of unassisted attempts if you embark on a weight loss journey. If you embark on these lifestyle changes with dietary changes, if you get moving, if you're more active, let's make these changes first. Let's see if we can get you to have normal cycles. That isn't happening, and further, this patient population, by the time they do get into the IVF clinic, it is so late. Their marriage has suffered. They've had so much depression and anxiety, and they could have learned much earlier on in their life that IVF probably was in their future and they could have started saving.
Yeah.
Or they could have looked for a job that has fertility benefits. They're not set up to make these big life decisions properly because they're not getting into the specialist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you it seems so basic, right? But it's clearly not, right? This idea that, you have to be healthy yourself as a starting point. And, and as you're saying it, I'm thinking, well, of course, because you're going to create a new life and you want to be the best and excuse my terminology, but host for for that life. And you need to be in the best shape going in. And it would only make sense that, it's almost like, and this is going to sound wacky and it's not scientific, but that, maybe nature has a way to say like, no, you're not ready.
No, it's absolutely the case. There's cause and effect, right? And nature, in the way that we're created, a woman's body is really created in a very inefficient manner. You only ovulate 1 egg per month. You're born with all the eggs you're ever going to have. Whereas opposed to men, you have a sperm washout every 3.5 months. Yeah. You're so lucky. You can make changes to your diet and lifestyle. You can, start consuming lots of antioxidants. You actually can see the physical improvement. 3.5 months, do another semen analysis, and you can see immediate results. Right. For women, it's much more difficult. Yes, there are certain things that we can look at in our bodies in terms of weight loss. We can set our goals. We can lose some weight. We know that that's progress. We can see changes in our cervical fluid, but most women don't know how to evaluate it. We can see changes to ovulation, whether we're ovulating or not, if we use the right ovulation kit for our condition. So that's kind of another area, is that women are using data tracking tools that aren't really even right for them. Right. And our company can set them up with the right tools, based on what they're dealing with. They can reverse symptoms of PCOS. They can improve even the impact of endometriosis by eating an anti-inflammatory diet. They can't control it, but they can make the best choices given what they're up against. It's just until they get that positive pregnancy test, and then until it sticks, because so many of us have had pregnancy losses, it's not immediate.
Yeah.
It's a long road. It's another marathon, you know? And so I do think that it's the most motivating time of someone's life. And I do think that we can, I wouldn't be doing this company if I didn't think we could break through about this concept that your health has to come first. You want to be able to jump on the trampoline with your child when they're 3, 4, 5 years old. You want to be active with them. And so if you're already struggling to conceive, you know, use that as a motivator, not just the pregnancy, but let's look at the whole family being healthy and vital so that you're around for your child.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise we're facing, you know, heart disease at younger and younger ages and type 2 diabetes, you know, insulin resistance, some of these patients that are in their 20s. And it's heartbreaking. You know, it is. And they're, you know, it's not an easy path for them. And I think I need to really stress that is that, you know, I don't pull any punches, that what they're facing, it's not just about infertility. PCOS is a lifelong thing. You know, women with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, yes, it can impact infertility, but it also follows them through menopause. They're at increased risk for insulin resistance and heart disease and all kinds of things. So, you know, yes, it's impacting this time in their life, but we're talking about lifestyle changes that can impact their whole entire life.
Yeah. Let's just keep talking about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the thing that kind of blows my mind. You have the feminist movement, you have the sex revolution that's part of that. And now you have this magic little bill that prevents pregnancy. And never in the trajectory did anyone sit any woman down, let alone a man, and say, by the way, you need to plan when you want to have a child.
Right.
We don't have, you know, especially when it first came out, we have no data to say when you're going to get a different normal cycle when you stop taking the pill. And now you have women who take the pill round the clock so that they don't even have a period. That impacts timing. They don't know what their body's going to do when they go off of it.
Yeah.
I mean, when they're not manipulating it.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy. Like, you know, when we were talking about it earlier, like the lack of basic information we seem to have across the board. And the more that you talk, the more ignorant I feel, but not in a bad way. In a, wow, why did nobody ever say that to me? Or why, you know, my curiosity only goes so far.
Yeah.
Without somebody introducing ideas to me.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
If somebody even introduces a little something, now suddenly you're in the, oh, I don't know that. And then you can go seek it out.
Yeah.
But people don't even know what to seek out. I mean, you know, I have a 6-year-old and I, way before he was even born, started to produce an onco-fertility course, really to train oncologists and social workers in oncology about this field and the kinds of things that they need to be talking to their patients about. I don't expect an oncologist to be an expert in reproductive medicine. I need them to know just enough so that they can get that patient to the right person. And I was so sad to be looking around and discovered there's literally no male resources, not for puberty, not for teens, not for young adults. I couldn't find any. And normally in healthcare, we see it the reverse. We see a lot of resources for men and nothing for women, or we see more research dollars spent on men and not enough for women. This was the reverse, and I was mind blown. And now I have a boy who at 6 years old, because of what I do for a living, and he works with me all the time and he travels around the world with me, he could probably teach a course to kids about, you know, human anatomy, reproductive biology. You know, he knows he was made in a petri dish, but he knows he has a donor. He knows that whole process, and he knows the process of sex.
Yeah.
I used real terms. I started educating him from the moment that he started asking questions. You know, he's seen what a tampon is. He knows what that looks like. You know, he knows what mama looks like naked. He knows what he looks like naked. And those are really important basics to set up a structure in the home that eliminates shame from day one. We just talk about it, what it is. There's no, that's gross. There's not any, I didn't wait till the awkward moments. You know, we won't have a sit down when he's 12 or 13 about the birds and the bees, because the birds and the bees don't exist in our house.
Yeah.
Like real humans exist.
Right.
You know, I was telling you kind of offline that, you know, he hit a growth spurt and all of a sudden his emotions were just completely out of whack. And it dawned on me, oh, you're probably having another testosterone surge. Mm-hmm. So what's testosterone? So then I got to talk about the male hormone and as it relates to his penis size growing and his testicle size growing, and that you produce more of the hormone testosterone, and it's going to take your pituitary gland up here, it's going to take your whole body a chance to kind of regulate. And so you're going to feel a little bit out of control until that regulation happens. Yeah. And I need to learn how to respond to you because it was very triggering for me. I just thought I had a lunatic on my hands all of a sudden. And then I was filled with empathy because I realized, oh, wow. Yeah. You really feel out of control right now because your body is.
It's so funny that you say this. I was home in Rhode Island visiting my parents, and I had this conversation with my mother, and it was one of these conversations that we can have now, which was like, areas where we failed, through the years. And, we were talking about, kind of that troublesome, I don't know, around 11 to 16, somewhere in that range. Yeah. And I said, I think that a lot of my problem, this is me talking to my mom, is I just didn't have a lot of confidence. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of things happening and I just didn't understand what was happening. Right. And I knew it made her feel, I didn't say it to make her feel bad, but I think we both realized that, it's an information problem.
It is.
Right? Because I wasn't like, if I was like, I don't know, let's say I egged somebody's house or I did some kind of juvenile behavior and somebody was like, Rob, why did you do that? And well, because I felt a lot of peer pressure and I really don't feel very confident right now. Right. My body's changing and I'm not sure what's going on.
Right, that was not going to come out of your mouth.
You
don't know.
You don't know that.
You don't know.
Instead, you're just like, bah!
Yeah. Leave me alone. Yeah. I want to do what I want to do.
And, and look, I clearly I'm not an expert on this, nor do I want to diminish it, but you hear, that young people get depressed.
Yeah.
All people get depressed. But even when you're young, if someone was just to say, hey, yes, you're depressed. There's so many things going on inside of you right now. Like, you don't know what's up.
Yeah. Look, it's coming at a time where they're trying to figure out who they are. And most of the time they're trying to figure out who they are in comparison to their peers. Yeah. While this backdrop of changes is underway. And especially for you, for males, you're growing hair in places you might not have known that you could grow hair, depending on your type of family and how open your family was. If your dad ever let you see his penis, or if you grew up with two moms or one mom and you never saw anybody else's penis before, and suddenly you have hair around yours, and that can be really confusing, or the fact that I remember the first time Dante probably might have been 2 or 3 years old, and he started to have unexpected hard-ons, and he hated how it felt. And it's not happening from a sexual standpoint. It's just a muscle. Yeah. It's a trigger. Sometimes you get super relaxed and then it happens. And so I had to explain, and I'm a woman and I'm trying to do the best that I can in even explaining it. But we talked about how it might feel uncomfortable because the skin is stretching, and it doesn't stretch all that often because of his age, and that when he's a grown man, he might want it to happen on purpose, which of course he thought was the craziest thing ever because it was so uncomfortable for him. Yeah. So when he first started to understand this, and then that's really how the first conversation about sex happened was, oh, you mean I want it to be hard on purpose, then I want to stick it inside somebody? Yeah. And as crazy as it was, though, it wasn't ever gross or uncomfortable. It was, Yeah. It really was like that because he started hearing about it when he was 3, and then he heard it again at 4 and 5 and 6. Each stage of life introduces new ways to ask a similar question. And my job as a parent is to try to find as age-appropriate ways to answer it as possible using accurate terms, using real human biology in completely accurate terms. And it is so sad to think about how we've made it not normal to have our hormones raging, even though it happens to everyone. Mm-hmm. And if we simply had words, I think we go into it even as parents almost with the assumption that it's going to be this horrible time and it's going to be filled with angst and filled with this and filled with trouble. I mean, it's almost like we manifest it from, happening rather than kind of setting people up for it. Like this, we're going to be heading into a period soon where these things are going to be happening. You're going to see that our relationship might feel like it's suffering. We might be battling. And before we get there, I want us to have all the cards on the table about what might happen. So when it does, we're not surprised.
Right. So prepared.
Totally prepared, you know, and so that it's normal and we don't make kids wrong for egging the house. You know, yes, there might be some consequences, but we might be able to put some language and some actual biology to it. And then, you know, hey, let's tee it up to be critical thinkers and use it as an opportunity to, you know, help our children choose to be critical thinkers and not just succumb to peer pressure.
You when you described, you know, the story you told about your son, I was thinking, you know, when I was a kid, I remember I grew up in a household where it was the 70s and I guess it was cool to have Playboy magazines on display, and my dad had a collection, and they were right out in the living room.
Yeah.
And I can remember discovering these, and I would lay on the floor and read them, and I could feel something that felt good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was probably 2 or 3 years old.
Sure.
And I'm told that at some point this behavior was discovered, right? Like,
right. Cause you don't remember. Sure.
Right. So but I remember the feeling, and I remember looking at them. I don't remember when this happened, but one day, and I remember this event, one day I went and they were gone. I couldn't find them anywhere. They had disappeared. And what I'm accused of doing is basically going to a bookcase, ripping all the books out of the bookcase and urinating on all the books, which is the craziest response.
Wow.
But if you think about like
they took a pleasure center away from you at a young age, and then you're going to be mad.
Yeah.
Of course.
Like the level of anger.
Yeah.
Like to just, you know,
pee
on stuff. It's very animalistic.
It's
like, I'm gonna pee on you. You know, it's like, and I don't remember doing it, but I just remember the loss. Like there was this thing in life that was awesome.
It was bringing you joy.
And it felt good. And now it's been taken away from me.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, so much of that feels like it's American culture.
Yeah.
You know, and you're not allowed because you're not old enough to feel good looking at boobs, you know?
Like, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just looking.
Right. Like there's supposed to be an age on that. That's like suddenly now you're old enough to look or to realize that makes you feel a little bit different than you felt before.
Yeah.
You know, I feel so lucky to have more than a decade in this field and to have so much education underneath me while being a parent. I'm a relatively older parent. Not relatively. I'm an old parent. I mean, I had my son when I was 37. I'd like to have another, you know, before I'm 45, but it's creeping up on me. And there's certainly natural life wisdom that comes with having a child later in life, but I didn't plan it that way. Cancer derailed sort of the path, but cancer also enabled the path because it forced me to make a choice about embryo freezing, picking a sperm donor, an anonymous donor when it happened. So it did force my hand into making some very difficult choices quickly. Felt premature, but I made them, and I'm so grateful because I have my son. Grateful for the technology, but I'm really grateful that I have, you know, this knowledge and education under my belt while I'm raising a son.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I think is, and the more that I talk to you, the more obvious it becomes that, you know, not only do you have this company, you know, that provides this great service and can pair people with expert advice and do some referrals, but you have an incredible amount of information. So
much information.
You know, and you know, the podcast is about data, and you know, and it might not seem to our listeners that we've been talking about data, but one of the things that we like to show here is to get people to think about data in a slightly different way. And, you know, that every piece of information has a source. Mm-hmm. And the origin of so much of the data that we collect is from human beings.
Yeah.
And for us not to forget that every statistic every number, every point on a chart. There's a human being behind it who felt something when they created this. And so if we're talking about, obesity rates or fertility rates, to know that there's tears behind that, and there's pain and
so much suffering,
and it's really easy for us to, we've been trained, right? The media has trained us to throw out it's because people are blank, or it's because of this and because of that. And it's really easy to say, but when you remove empathy from your statement, it's
you lose humanity.
Yeah, it's cold. It's mean. It's harsh. And we're all here together, and we're just what is it? We're all just trying to get by. And and we it's tough, right? I wrestle with this because there's always a battle going on, because you're trying to do something good, and you're trying to get by, and you're trying to make money, and you're trying to survive. Right. And you're always having to sacrifice something, right? You always have to pick. And the reason I say that is that maybe if our goal was to figure out a way to help people not have to make those decisions, right? By giving them access to the information they need. And so you'll see where I'm taking this with MedAnswers, you're basically creating that in a way that all of a sudden I don't have to make choices I thought I had to make, because you've in a way broadcast valuable information to me that, it's helping me, and it's helping me to understand what I'm really dealing with.
Yeah, the way that we want to approach it is in a really modern way. Yes, when the internet emerged, it was great to Google whatever you wanted. And I remember the first search terms, you had to be an expert at combining keywords.
Yeah. And you do the quote. Yeah,
yes, and all of that.
I know how to search.
Yeah, that became a job, that you just knew how to search. And then it became so sophisticated that, now, my 6-year-old can put in the first letter or the first 3 letters of something, and he's like, oh, that's the word I need.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to spell out the whole thing. So if I think about that, though, and you Google the common search terms like infertility, you're going to get 48 million hits. So nobody really goes past the first page anymore. I wish that there was a quick way to go to the last page so I can see what the 48 millionth hit really is.
Yeah.
I want to see what that is, but I've never taken the time to even go through, but it would be a good exercise to do it. So when I look at that and I think about all these sources of information, we do not have a lack of information problem, but we have an overwhelm problem, and we have a synthesizing problem. We don't, especially in kind of the American education system, don't really have a way to teach critical thinking skills. We don't really have a good method of teaching synthesis, where you take, tons and tons of disparate information and you can synthesize it into something that helps you make a head and heart decision. People say follow your gut, but when you're completely drowning in knowledge and information and trying to assess which part pertains to you and which part doesn't, then you can't even follow your gut, because you're just in doubt, you're questioning, you just don't know. And that's why people turn to their peers to say, what should I do?
Yeah.
And it's the wrong place to turn. So we're trying to eliminate all that by using really modern tools and modern resources. And one way is just to collect some self-reported data in a really simple fashion. And at least if you're somebody struggling with PCOS, I know which ovulation kit to refer you to. Because I know that the most common one out there, the cheapest one out there, is not the right one for you. Because I know that if you have PCOS, then there's a certain hormone that's supposed to signal ovulation that's all over the map all month long. And so you'll get inaccurate information. That simple change can help the most common infertility cause outside of obesity with PCOS. I mean, that's millions of women, just that little piece of information. And you don't have to go figuring that on your own, because you already told me that you have PCOS. Or in the case of, genetics, we can see who's at risk for PCOS, who might not be diagnosed yet, at least genetically. Lifestyle factors play in too. And that one thing can be a game changer.
Yeah.
Because PCOS doesn't mean people can't get pregnant unassisted. But I need that data point in order to present the right solution to you. Likewise, age and BMI really matter, because we don't need you to look at a chart and find yourself on the chart. Tell me your age, tell me your height, tell me your weight. We'll tell you what your BMI is, and we'll tell you what that means for you. And it'll mean something different today than it will in 3 years potentially, depending on where you are in that age continuum, because age does impact fertility so much for both men and women, for men in a different way, but for women super significantly. And with those data points, I think what we're trying, we're starting to build in here is being one step ahead of the user base. If you had a pocket advisor, that's what I want to be able to do. Tell me where you're at. Tell me what you're dealing with. We can even do the same thing looking at hormones. So we have some algorithmic things that we'll be doing with hormones and genetics and all the data to be able to say, okay, here's your risk. Here's what you need to be aware of.
Yeah.
I mean, even when people get their labs, they come on and they say to us, and they often message us on Facebook, not just in the app itself. And they'll say, I just got my labs done. I have no idea what it means. So just by being able to, in very simplistic terms, tell them this is what your exact labs mean. Again, not going to the reference chart online to try to figure it out themselves, but to have somebody simply say, this means you're normal for your age. This means you're not. This is a red flag because of this reason. Here's what you do with that score. You can impact this naturally. You can't impact these. Mm-hmm. Or you need a second opinion.
Right.
Something as simple as that.
It really hit me as you described that, this idea that, yes, you're in the business of providing reliable information, but you're also figuring out how to get the right questions. And that becomes its own data source as well.
It does.
Even the way that somebody asks a question is very revealing.
It's really totally revealing. I mean, I had somebody look at a machine learning guy looked at the data set and he goes, boy, you have some stressed out users. And I said, I do. I know. And if you look at some of our users will copy and paste their question in 3 or 4 categories within seconds of each other.
Right.
And I just feel their desperation. I feel their intense emotion that they so desperately need to get this answered, that they take the time to copy and paste it into, a few different categories.
Yeah. You can feel the frantic nature and the anxiety behind that. I mean,
same thing with the misspellings. So there's a lot of data around that you can assess stress level because of, I just thought it's because we all don't know how to spell anymore, but it's really a stress indicator.
Yeah.
Lack of punctuation, run-on sentences. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're feeling scared.
Yeah.
In anything that's going on that's feels abnormal, and you don't know what to do, and you're panicking. And
that's right.
The last thing, I think that's why people are so susceptible to misinformation, right? Because you're desperate. I just want an answer.
That's the thing. You don't have the ability to be discerning.
Yeah. Because
the piece of information that just came at you somehow made you feel less stressed out.
Yeah.
And so that drop in that physiological response, that very real drop in cortisol because you got any answer, sets you up to believe it.
Yeah.
And it might not be true for you.
It's really hard, right? It's normal for us to seek out advice from one another. Right. And a common criticism I have of friends is, I have friends and I'll go to them with a problem. And a lot of times the answer is yeah, you're screwed. And it's wait.
I'm not going to invite those friends to my dinner party. Just saying, Rob.
Oh, you're screwed. You better fix that.
Oh, man.
And it's wait.
That's not really what I wanted.
I know I'm
needed.
Screwed. I know I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
But when you're in that, tell me what to do. Right? That is a dangerous zone.
Yes, for sure.
Tell me what to do. I just need something because I know I'm screwed and I feel the pain and I'm, and all the stresses of life hit you at once. And, I think, I had a friend and I said, man, I woke up in the middle of the night and I wake up and I'm crazy and I don't know what I'm thinking and I have these crazy thoughts oh my God, I even think it would be better to be dead than be this stressed out. And he said, oh, I have those too. And I said, wait, you do too? And he said, yeah, so everyone does. it's like, and I was like, wait, no, they don't. There's no way that this can't be like a thing. And, but in talking about it and a few other people joined in and they're like, yeah, well, you wake up in the middle of the night. The last thing you need to be doing is thinking about anything like that. Like you're tired. You're not thinking straight. Like going back to your sleep comment, like you're deprived.
Yeah.
Like you can't make any good decisions then.
Right.
You need to figure out how to not think about anybody. Like read a comic, read a comic book.
No, I'm going to give you this great meditation app. There's a brilliant man who does sleep meditations. I can listen to the quality of his voice is so incredible. 15 seconds, I'm already back asleep. Yeah. So we'll get you. Yeah. We'll get you that one.
Yeah. But this, you know, I think the point I'm trying to make is that if I woke up in the middle of the night and I was stressed out about something and someone offered me an answer, I might be so desperate that I would take that answer as the truth.
That's how people take
it.
Yeah.
And lose objectivity completely because I'm so frazzled.
That's right.
You know, and
that's when people are on the Facebook groups at 3 o'clock in the morning when they can't sleep and they're stressed. I mean, the number of people that say to me, my husband's going to leave me if I can't give him a baby. I mean, when you talk about data, not being data, but being humans, you know, one of our core values is empathy. And not everybody comes to the company naturally with empathy. We've had a couple of engineers who had a total shift in their perspective on life because they realized that they were treating the person more as a number, more as a data point than they were as a human. And their mind blew open because they get to practice empathy every day. Yeah. And you do have to practice it every day. It does have to be, you know, for some of us, it's all we know, and it can be tiring because you feel everything that everybody feels. But for other people, it's not quite so intense like that, you know, and it has to be a choice, you know, where's the empathy in this? And we have empathy for all people. So I think that danger when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you take it as truth. I mean, we're heading into this area of medicine called precision medicine. It is completely dependent on individualized data points. And I think the public needs to realize that when they're going and getting advice from their friend or from Facebook, it is the least precise approach that there is. It doesn't mean that it's wrong at all. It's still, I think, opening up and talking about things, being vulnerable is incredibly important, especially in this digital world we live in, that we're lacking so much human connection that it makes every crisis we're going through even more isolating and more depressing and more scary because we're not taking so much time to have the human-to-human connection. So I am 100%, in support of open vulnerability, being super raw and real, and having that super raw and real be met with just empathy and a good ear. But I just want people to understand that there are avenues to get the precise path, to get access to more precision medicine. None of medicine is 100% precise yet. Right. That just doesn't exist. I don't know if it ever will, quite frankly, but it's certainly better because of genetics, because of tumor markers, because of these things that we have, these data points that we have. Likewise, even in the field of IVF, if IVF is the end result, we have so many data points to suggest some level of standardization, but we still need that human provider to say, yeah, but I think we need to tweak this. I think we need to tweak that because, these unique circumstances with your body in particular, there is nothing that's a one size fit all. There just isn't. Yeah. And I think that is one of the hardest parts about the reproductive journey is, I see this all the time with obesity and the weight loss groups that I'm in. And also with PCOS, people say like, what diet worked for you? Keto. Yeah. Which version of keto? Right. Like keto is not one size fit all. Like which keto is it? And that kind of, drives me crazy too. And again, we need that support structure to even embrace keto. I don't know what somebody's family situation is. I don't know how rigid they can be with it. I don't know emotionally what's happening with them, and I'll never throw out, just kind of a blanket diet plan as a piece of advice. Yeah. And our nutritionists on the app wouldn't either. Right. But those types of things are the things that kind of wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been talking a lot about the idea of, we're collecting this data and we want to look at the data with empathy and think about the individuals who are creating it. But what we didn't talk about yet, and what I think we should, is the people who are actually looking at the data. One of the goals of our conversation that I had was, I know you, and I know, enough, I think, about you, and what I've come to believe over the course of the last, half an hour, 40 minutes, is that you take the responsibility that you have with this access that you've got now, access to data on both sides. You take it very, very seriously. And one of the things that I think scares people is that they think that machines are primarily the responsible party with their data. But it's actually humans.
It's humans.
It's humans on both sides. And so I wondered if we could talk a little bit about that sense of responsibility. And, as we start thinking about machine learning, and as we start, and who knows what it's really going to mean, but artificial intelligence, where the humanity starts to get stripped out. What is the sense of responsibility for those of us who are creating those mechanisms?
That actually made me emotional. The weight of the responsibility is so great to be doing what I'm doing, and the honor that I get to do it so large that just hearing you say those words makes me choked up. When we say we have 37,000 users and we add 1,000 per week, it's 37,000 human lives that I'm trying to help, all of them at one time.
Yeah.
And I have to use technology to make it scalable so that I can, because not one human and not my team of 40 humans can help all 37,000 today if it was a 1-to-1 ratio.
Right.
But we can use these tools. We can use machine learning. Depending on the AI, we can maybe use AI, not to replace humans, to augment humans, to replicate us. We talk internally about the Alice bot. Can we have an Alice bot that can just start the conversation? And at no point is it to replace me or to replace one of my fertility navigators or replace an expert. It's to augment them, because there's a first part of the conversation where almost, where we can get into it pretty quickly to get a little bit of the data going. And then there's a point where you convert that to a human. But I'm so deeply moved to be doing the work that I'm doing. It's a calling. And when you reflect and say you take this responsibility so incredibly seriously, failure is not an option.
Yeah.
Because failing at this company means failing all these people, and we won't do that. This is the right thing for the market. This is, one of a tool of many. We don't claim to be the only tool, that the field needs or that the market needs. I feel like we're an innovative one because we have taken such a human approach to it. And there's the way that I even think about machine learning and the data, or even the people who are looking at the data. I think this is the next sort of generation of thought leadership and the thinking employee. And when we first, were scared that technology was going to be replacing all these positions, robots replacing humans. But those knowledge workers are really needed right now, because you can write algorithms to look at your data for you. A human doesn't even have to touch it.
Yeah.
But at some point, humans do need to look at it, and they need to have that synthesizing ability and that empathetic view of the data. So it's not just numbers, but the way that you intuitively can even look at trends. I noticed this trend in our data. Most people would look at our data and say 45% of our married users, 45% of our users are married, trying to conceive and struggling. Well, that means another 45% is unmarried trying to have a baby.
Yeah.
That didn't used to be a trend.
Right.
And I think, what do you need the data for? Well, that didn't really concern anybody else. That concerns me for a number of reasons. If I look at that and I think, okay, there's this trend, it's probably the backlash of the divorce rate. There's a generation of kids that grew up with divorced parents. I mean, a whole generation of kids where it was the rarity that you had parents that stayed together because the norm has become divorce. So why would they want to head into a marriage? But they're trying to have families. And if they need IVF, then the male partner will be treated as a known sperm donor. So knowing this piece of information about my users means that I can put a piece of information in front of them that if they need IVF, if I refer them to an IVF clinic, I also need to refer them to a reproductive attorney and a reproductive psychologist so that they can kind of address this in the family structure, because family isn't married family,
Right.
but the laws are written for heterosexual married couples. They just are. In California, we're more progressive than any other state when it comes to kind of shoring that up and making sure that we're more inclusive from a legal perspective. But that is the harsh reality for all the rest of the states. So this responsibility means understanding where people are at, no matter who the user is. And yes, kind of as humans, we can fit into little categories, where we are in the journey or what our diagnosis is. I mean, we can certainly use some of those data points to form some similarities to help the technology do its job a little bit faster and a little bit better. But never do we want to lose that human connection, even with the answers. So we know we did a little study and we saw that about a third of our questions were repetitive. We could build some machine learning around that and let the machine suggest answers. We don't want the machine to provide the answer, though. We'll use the machine to suggest answers to our very busy experts who are volunteering their time and let them say, I approve that answer, or let me edit it a little bit just to save everybody time and make it more scalable.
Yeah. No. Well, here's what I'm hearing, right? And tell me if I've picked this up correctly. That you guys have concluded that the value of this data, right, is beyond calculation right now. It is information that, your words, that you are privileged to utilize in ways that benefit everyone, right? And one of the things we talk a lot about is, this idea that data has value and untapped value, and we're all trying to figure out what it is. But what you've done is, instead of saying that, oh, this data is valuable, blah, 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 you've said, here's how this data is valuable. I have 100 conversations a week with people who are scared about where their data goes and who's doing what. And I am just so happy to have this conversation with you, and to know that there are people out there that are collecting this information and they are treating it like gold, better than gold.
Yeah. People do get really concerned about that. And, I'm having a data-driven company. I'm one of those people that I don't care who has my data, as long as they're responsible with it and they're using it for good, right? I mean, as a small business, and I'm still a small business, but as a small business owner, if I didn't have the ability to have a scalable marketing plan on Facebook, thanks to the data sources that are available, I wouldn't even been able to go to market.
Yeah.
So that perspective, people get really, concerned about Facebook. And at first it was really creepy that it seemed like they were listening to your conversations and presenting the right ad to you. And some people are like, I don't want, Alexa, because she's listening in. And I'm like, listen, listen in. I have nothing to hide.
Right.
Just keep making my life better and easier.
Yeah.
You know, these are the types of things that I'm okay with, but I'm an early adopter, right? And not everybody is. And I totally get that, especially with genetics and, you know, people who think like, oh, well, you know, my genetic data might end up getting a family member convicted of a crime. Boy, do I get those concerns. And there are a lot of uncertainties with the government and, you know, how much can the FBI just say, you have to give us that access to that. You know, these are really troubling things. Genetics is a very small part of what we do. We don't have whole genome sequencing. We have, you know, a small amount of SNPs that we collect on our users that decide to get their genetics run. Most of the data on our side is self-reported.
Yeah.
You know, we're not connected to EMRs. We may or may not be, you know, we may or may not need that. It's really about being responsive to our users and again, being one step ahead of them. If we ever did anything with our data, then my position on that, what I mean, did anything with it, meaning if we're going to give other partners access to it, I 100% will create a financial model that cuts the user into it. Because I do believe that in this new data economy, that everyone should be sharing in the wealth and that there's enough wealth to go around when it comes to this.
Yeah, which is huge. I'm an early a member of like 23andMe, and I mean, we're talking like, you know, I mean, it was a long time ago that they sent in my kit, and you know, they had a different model for how they charged, and I always thought that like there would come a day where they would be sending me checks, right? Because I thought, oh, I'm giving you access to this, and then
you're leveraging it.
Yeah,
I paid to give you a revenue stream.
Yeah,
that's basically what happens, and I'm fundamentally against that. You know, we want to be a leader in that space and say, no, that's not right. You know, right now, the self-reported data is a free access. So there's a value exchange there. We didn't set up the health profile to collect data. I'm an accidental data economist. Accidentally, okay? My 100%, my intention in collecting health information was so that the experts would have the relevant pieces of information they needed to answer your question with personalization.
Right. Because
if you're, especially with age, BMI, diagnoses, these things are very specific to each individual. And the same question at 25 is going to get a different answer at 35.
Right.
Or 37 or 40. It's going to get a different answer. Slightly different, you know? And so that's why I set up the health profile. That's why I asked for self-reported data. Now we have very high 85, 90% of our users do fill out a complete health profile. There's certain pieces of information people don't have on themselves, which is concerning. It's basic lab work.
Yeah.
They don't have the answers for that because it's just not happening. I mean, labs is one of the things that for me, you know, everybody should have a current set of labs on themselves. Like nutritional, in my opinion, nutritional labs, you know, see how your body's doing on your levels of really important vitamins and micronutrients, you know, and hormones. Those things should be tracked on a consistent basis. There's other markers that you don't have to do every single year. But when I think about the kind of transformation that we can provide to the whole field, and I think about your experience in being an adult male, a married adult male, and not having a single doctor ever say to you, are you thinking about having kids one day?
Yeah.
And if you were, then the next step should have been what I like to call, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who uses this term, but a fertility wellness checkup. That should be standard of care.
Yeah.
If your pap smear is, you know, routine, if your prostate check becomes routine at some point in your life, why are we not having a fertility wellness checkup where we look under the hood and we check everything? We can check genetics, we can check hormone levels, we can do the scans, we can do a sperm analysis, do a hair analysis. I mean, look at heavy metals, look at the environment and the impact that it's having on us. Look at those endocrine blockers and how, gosh, what a huge negative impact they have on fertility. But I you know, that's where this is headed. This is headed to a place where with a combination of direct to consumer kits for hormones and, you know, genetics and so forth, coupled with, you know, human analysis of the data, then we can get people on the path to wellness, which if we look at kind of like that unbelievable marker of health and wellness, and it's fertility.
Yeah. You talk about markers. I love my doctor, right? And he's a friend, but his technology is not super advanced. So, I'll get like a fax basically.
I can't believe that faxes are HIPAA compliant. This is the biggest, the craziest thing to me is that HIPAA is so behind that faxes are still considered HIPAA compliant.
Yeah. Yeah. And and in the quality, I can't even read the thing.
You can't read it, I know.
It looks like a carbon copy.
Yes,
from
exactly.
25 years ago.
Most people don't even know what a carbon copy is. Yeah. Rob, that's how old you and I are.
Yeah. Or I am. But I found a company and and I'm not promoting them, but it's called Veho, and they are kind of like I want to say it's a wellness company, and every 3 months they do extensive blood work.
Wow.
And explain to you all of your markers, and they're providing you basically a supplement concoction for you to drink every day to try to get everything within the ranges that you want. And and it's not a cheap program.
I'm sure it's not.
Right. And but you're going through this experience, and you're me as a customer and consumer, I'm thinking, why isn't this available to everybody? Like I have a year's worth of data.
Wow.
Right? I have a year where every 3 months there's a checkup, and I can see, and I can now link it up to what's going on in my life. To even like, oh, that's a weekend where I went away for my birthday, and I got a little crazy, and I can see the impact that even like 3 days might have, on what's going on inside. And you're even stress, or, oh my gosh, I didn't sleep well during that time, or that's when I was worried about blah, blah, blah. And you can see what it does to your health.
Well, I'm hooked. I want to do the program. So maybe you should promote them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to ask a friend of mine to come in and do a talk on the show, but
I think it's great.
But you look at these programs
because you get the feedback loop.
Yeah,
that's the thing that's there, that's not there with anything else. And that's what I was saying about even doing routine sperm analysis. And I have a partner called Fertility, and I am happy to promote them because they've got a great product. What it does is just measure count, but count can be impacted by stress, by your testosterone level, by your exercise level, by the heat of your testicles.
Yeah.
It's impacted by weight. Weight can impact heat as well. And so all these different parameters, and you do get that feedback loop, and it's about the same time that they're on, where you get every 3.5 months, every 4 months, do a repeat semen analysis. So you have a complete washout. I think that type of information is just incredible. Now, a lot of people are scared of blood though, and they're scared of blood draws.
Yeah.
So the only, the thing when we're talking about like mass market appeal and approach is I've really learned about our user base. I mean, some people are so terrified of needles. They're trying to have a baby and they've never had a pap smear or a blood draw because, they've either been so shamed by the system when they were younger that they're like, no, somebody needs to come to my house. Or truly their fear is so intense that even the cortisol spike that happens when they get their blood draw throws off the numbers anyway.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we're heading into an era where there's maybe, other alternative technologies to get the same type of data though.
Right.
Did they measure your cortisol?
Yes.
You have a cortisol over. I know mine is like sky high.
Yeah. And we found that it was a very stressful time.
Sure.
Things they prescribed, I work with a nutritionist. They prescribed meditation. Like they changed the way I get up in the morning and what I do.
Wow.
Like, and a lot of it, I think might feel a little, I don't know, earthy, crunchy, but
sure.
But the thing is, we don't really know what works for everybody.
We don't, right? But we can universally say there's enough data on meditation to say that meditation positively impacts every single human being on the planet.
Yeah.
There's too much data to deny that.
Yeah.
That it staves off depression, that it also staves off dementia. There's so much good data on meditation that, we encourage meditation in my company. We do it on conference calls. So there's a gratitude meditation that we did just before Thanksgiving. And the whole company, it works remotely, and we get on our video calls, and I hold up the app with the person leading the gratitude meditation, and we all do it together.
Oh, wow. That's super cool.
Yeah.
We should do that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I want, we have a time slot that kind of we've invited everybody to do it every day. And there's a few people who are really religious with it. I myself was super religious with it when there was a particular instructor. Mm-hmm. This is a detriment to me, but this is my humanity. The instructor left. So the meditation teacher left, and then there was somebody in his place, and I like have this block of like, I want Andrew back. Right. Yeah. And that's on me. And I've struggled to find a new teacher that, that I'm connected with as much. But, I think that's what happens, in communities as we get attached. Right. Yeah. And it's my own kind of processing of being unattached, but committed.
Yeah. I think, this amazing thing is happening, and I think you're helping enable it, right? That, we are becoming much more informed, not only of, the larger sense of what's happening to other people, but what's happening to us.
Yeah.
And,
there's a consciousness happening. Yeah, for sure.
Like this self-awareness. And I think that one thing that must naturally happen to the users of MedAnswers is that no matter what, they are going to begin to know themselves better.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, if you want to be a parent, there's a path for everyone. And yes, with varying price tags associated with it. But if you can't imagine your life in any other way, like I couldn't, we'll help you get there. Yeah. We will help you get there.
That's fantastic. Hey, let me just throw out some less heavy questions.
Sure.
Or maybe they'll get heavy.
With you and I, they're probably going to get heavy.
They're going to get real heavy real fast. Okay. Okay. If you weren't doing this, is there something else you could see yourself doing?
Oh, so, there's a few things in my life that I've taken on that I've kind of incorporated all of them into what I'm doing. So as an entrepreneur, I've definitely gotten to create kind of a magic role for myself. Mm-hmm. I get to do cool things like podcasts and video production and create educational content for users and for experts. I get to connect with humans. I get to do sales, which I was practically born doing. I get to do a ton of public speaking, a ton of, video work and so forth. I get to do a lot of writing. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing enough writing to fulfill my creative need. So it's hard to look back and say, well, I also get to do advocacy, which, lobbying has been a huge part of my career in fertility, a huge part. I was the first sperm lobbyist in the whole country. Wow. I was the first and only. I'm still the only, and I don't actively do it these days.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it was, a title that I have a lot of enthusiasm around. And my lobbying mentor used to love introducing me to the legislators as this is our sperm lobbyist. Yeah. So what that really meant is that I was representing the sperm banks and the egg donor banks and the offspring that are created as a result of these banks existing. So lobbying is still something that's really important to me because I learned pretty young that my voice really does count. And especially when you're out there in front of legislators. So is there one thing? I've always been kind of a hybrid person. I don't think so. Would I go back to helping other companies grow? Probably. But with all the different opportunities I have with MedAnswers, with obesity answers, diabetes answers, migraine answers, oncology answers, pediatric answers, allergy answers. the list is endless, right? Yeah. We need all of these domains to exist in the type of marketplace that I've created and proven with fertility. I cannot fathom me, myself, heading up anything else other than fertility.
Alice, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming in and spending some time with me. I really enjoyed the conversation. And just a reminder to everybody, MedAnswers, it's a great thing. If you're going to trust anybody, I would trust Alice. I strongly recommend her. And, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Alice.
Thanks, Rob. I hope we get to do it again sometime. I
Absolutely.
really enjoyed it.
Yes.
This was awesome.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Dante, is that okay? Thank you, Alice.
Thanks, Rob.
You've been listening to Brave New Data, the Data Economics Podcast, presented by Lydion Research. I'm your host, Rob Maigret. Our guest today is Alice Crisci. We're shot and edited by Toughtown with sound engineering by Alfred Montejano. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe where all great podcasts can be found. Thanks, and have a good one.